Okay, and we're going to get started. My name is Damon Cart. I'm CEO of NLP Gym, and I'm super excited to be doing this webinar again with Dr. L. Michael Hall. This is going to be a value-packed webinar. We're probably going to run a little over an hour, especially getting to your questions. And with this webinar is based on a book and also a longer workshop called Inside Out Wealth. Dr. Hall is not someone who was born into wealth. He was not someone born into millions. He, at the age of 38, only had $500 to his name after divorce and sole custody of his daughter. And he was also teaching NLP and not making very much money doing that as well, and got challenged to do a modeling project and modeling wealth and using NLP to model wealth. And what's interesting about that is, you've probably heard of NLP if you're on this webinar, even if you haven't had the training. But this is a good example of putting NLP to the test. Can you make an NLP model and make this thing work? And it absolutely worked for Dr. Hall. When I read his book a few years ago, Inside Out Wealth, it was a huge game changer for me. I also know that there's so much more to learn. And so that's why I'm super happy we have him here on this webinar, and we will be making an offer towards the end of this webinar. So if you're at all offended by us making an offer for further training, then you've been warned. And but don't let that stop you from getting tremendous value from what Dr. Hall is about to teach. So if you're on this webinar, you're probably like me, and you probably you were like Michael Hall at one time, feeling the pinch and the pain of money, finances, whatever you categorize it as. And I'm sure some of you, or most of you, are probably not in the dumps. You probably have enough money to pay your bills, but you might be living paycheck to paycheck, or you know that you could do so much more. You know that you have so much more potential, and you know that in addition to that, with more money, more wealth, you could do more good in the world. So there's all those feelings, and I know I struggle with this a lot. I struggle with that pain of knowing that I can do more, that I could make more money to help my kids out, and then eventually my grandkids when I hopefully have them. And it's just also those times where we fall into those. We need an there's an emergency, there's a crisis, and it knocks us off balance, and it takes us a while to recover financially, and then maybe we have to borrow money, or it just gets worse and worse. And so how do we get beyond that? How do we get to a point in wealth and a confidence in ourselves and in our value as wealth creators, that we could be dropped into any crisis, dropped into any place around the world, and we know, because we have that value within us, that we can create wealth. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Dr. L. Michael Hall, and like I said, really looking forward to this, and ask those questions along the way so that you don't forget them, and we will get to them at the end of the webinar. So I introduced to you Dr. L. Michael Hall, and I also forgot to mention Dr. Hall is also he's written, was it 60 books now?
Yeah, something like that.
And pretty much all of them having to do with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, or it comes from NLP, right?
Well, thank you, Damien. Appreciate that. What we're going to do here is talk about wealth, talk about the strategy of wealth, how wealth is created. We'll talk a little bit about what wealth is, so that we're really clear about that. And as Damien said, this came from a modeling project that I did a number of years ago, both interviewing a lot of people who had made millions and going to the literature to look at all the longitudinal studies of people who had created wealth and what worked and what did not work. Probably from an NLP standpoint, one of the first things to mention that'll set the agenda for the day is that there is no singular wealth creation state. So in a lot of things there's the state of motivation, there's the state of decision, there's primary states for being compassionate, being empathetic. But when it comes to wealth creation, there's no singular state. There's going to be a whole range of states. And so the strategy is going to be a series of strategies as well. And so the difference here is very similar to what happens in health and fitness. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there was one state for health and fitness, and you just access it, and suddenly you're healthy and fit? Well, it just doesn't work that way. So you can access a state of wealth, and it's interesting how many seminars will get people to think and imagine that they're wealthy, to say words of affirmation, I'm a millionaire, and somehow that's supposed to create wealth. Well, wealth is created over a period of time, and it is more of a symptom than it is the direct expression. So moving down through the slides here, get to the next slide. There it is. The systematic question that we want to ask is, what does it take to create wealth? And what is the wealth that we want to create? What do we need to know about it? And what are the secrets, if there are any secrets? And what are the myths? So that'll be an overview of what we're going to look at. And what I'd like to do is just present 10 facts about wealth creation that'll give us an overview and help to think more systematically and intelligently about wealth creation. So here's our first statement. Wealth creation is profoundly simple. That is, it's not rocket science, and you really don't have to have complicated process for it. But what is profound is the kind of thinking that needs to be developed. So Thomas Stanley, who was the researcher at Harvard, who wrote the book Millionaire Next Door and then Millionaire Mind, his whole point after interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people who had created wealth was, we have to think like a millionaire. So that's going to be our first task, to thinking like a millionaire, which brings up the question, how do millionaires, first generation rich millionaires, not those who inherited wealth, how do they think, and how is that thinking different from the way most of us think? And so that's what we got to get to, that kind of thinking, and that's what we'll do as we go through this process today. It does demand a special kind of thinking, and that kind of thinking is going to be, in many instances, counterintuitive to the way we normally think about wealth and about money and about the creation of wealth.
Absolutely true in my experience, and from reading your book, that's exactly the shift that I had to make was wealth is not money. And when I'm focused on money, that's really a scarcity position, and focusing on wealth is an abundance position. And speaking to the simplicity of this too, the last webinar we did, you mentioned it's simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And yeah. I think that is so profound. You know, when we want things to be simple, and you're right, this is absolutely simple. That doesn't mean there's no work. There is work. There are things to learn. So.
Yeah, and just very similar to health and fitness. It's simple to understand how to be physically fit and healthy. Doing it is hard. Doing it involves a lot of effort, and so with wealth creation. Well, what is so simple about it? Well, here is the basic strategy. Here's all you have to do. First of all, identify your potential talents, the things you can do that adds value, and to identify it and then become passionate about it. Once you've done that, then intentionally invest in your own development so that you create these valued skills that people will pay money for, the value that you add. Then find some economic engine and the right market. So it may be creating a market, maybe finding a market, much easier to do that. And then that economic engine, what's the profit loss process, and how are you going to do that? Then develop a business sense and structure, because you do need to have some kind of business plan and format of how you're going to get that done. And then just persist for a decade. That's all. Handle the ups and downs with resilience, because there will be ups and downs. as we learn as we go. Keep your vision passionate, and all the while keep learning more and more of how to add value. So strategy, pretty simple.
So some people, and I'm not saying anyone attending this webinar this very moment, but some people might have heard what you just said or read what's on the screen and say, "Oh wow, I thought you said it was simple, and this seems really overwhelming." Because I think that's what happens, and it'll speak to maybe the
Okay.
next myth that you shine light on. But what would you say to people right now if they just heard everything you just said and say, "Oh, this sounds a little like it's a little too much. It's a little too overwhelming."
Right. And looking at it from this standpoint, it probably does look overwhelming that there are a number of things. And yet if we take it step by step, which is always the way to achieve anything of real significance, and if we're going to develop that excellence in it, it is just doing it step by step. If you look at it, it's all based upon talent and passion. Once you have that, then it's that connection with the real world, adding value. Once you've done that, then you'll want to develop that connection with the real world by creating a business. And once you have a business, it's just persisting and handling the challenges that come along and keeping your passion and your learning for new potentials, continue that going. So we could simplify this screen in three things. It's your potentials, it's your passion, and it's your profit as you connect it with the real world.
Wonderful. That was so well said. So yes, that really puts it together. And to speak to what you're saying, we can break this out into bite-sized chunks for people who might feel overwhelmed by this, and that's really the way
Yeah.
to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if that's point one, that it's really not rocket science. It can be learned, and if a person has a passion for learning and is willing to learn, put out that effort, then it's just a matter of time. The second point is that there's no magic bullet for creating wealth. So if that's what you were looking for, I guess you can take a deep sigh now. If there's some tears you need to shed, shed those tears. There's no magic bullet. Um, we could say, instead of there being a secret, a single secret that's going to do it, there's many secrets along the way. And the second bullet put on the screen, run from anyone who says that they have that secret, because they're usually trying to create wealth for themselves by taking it from you. And how many things are done today in that way, because we get suckered in and deceived by thinking there's one secret. What there is steps and stages. There's many stages in the timeline of creating wealth, and in those stages there's going to be steps, and inside of those steps we're going to have the right state, the right understanding, and that's usually best worked if you have a plan. And so creating that plan, working that plan, is going to be right at the heart of wealth creation.
Yeah, and I think what I was mentioning, how some people might feel overwhelmed by the previous summary that you gave. Well, that's sort of the marketing that the single bullet marketers do. They go after those people who feel overwhelmed by that. Wealth
Yeah.
creation is a process, and there are a lot of parts, and you do have to learn as you go. Well, there's plenty of people who are marketing to those people with this single bullet marketing, and it pulls them in because it says, "Oh no, wealth creation isn't all those things. It's one thing, and all you have to do is this one thing."
Yeah.
And then what happens is they get that person's money, and then they're off, and the person who paid for that because they were looking for something easier doesn't become wealthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, they
I
become
created
less
my
money.
I created my first wealth creation plan just within the first couple of months of beginning to interview people and start the reading. And the wealth creation plan, because I had some limiting beliefs that I couldn't make it through training, I couldn't make it through consulting or coaching, I decided I would make it through real estate. And so my first plan was I'm going to get a hold of, I'm going to somehow buy an investment property. Well, that's a big goal. And at the time, as you mentioned earlier, I really had no money to invest in that. Um, but once I created a plan, then I had something I could do every single day to begin working that plan. And of course, the first thing I did was reading the newspaper, looking for somebody that had property that they wanted to unload and who would carry the mortgage for me. So every day I read the newspaper looking for that. And it gave me something to do to start the process.
And this is, I mean, for people watching, this will be a theme throughout this webinar, and then the workshop is consistency. And
Mm.
so this is a good time to bring up when I first met Dr. Hall a few years ago, and I just had to know how he was able to write so many books. So we're talking about somewhere around 60 books, and because I'm a writer, and you know, it took me 10 years to finish my first book. And so I said, Dr. Hall, tell me how, you know, how much do you write in a day? And I'm thinking he's going to tell me he's writing like 6 hours, 8 hours a day. He told me he wrote a half an hour a day. This absolutely blew my mind, and this is why I said, you've got to come and teach us this in Santa Cruz. And that's when I brought him here through NLP Gym to teach the workshop that he taught last year, which was metastates, and it teaches how to go into a flow state. And I got to put that to the test. And I wrote a half an hour a day for 8 months and finished the first draft of my book that I'm working on now. And it worked, a half an hour a day. And then when I tell people that, I pull, like, well, actually, I have it right here. I pull this up and I say, I did this a half an hour a day for 8 months. People don't believe it. And I didn't believe it either. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about this training, is that what Dr. Hall teaches works. If I can go from taking 10 years to write a book, my first book, to 8 months to finishing the first draft, that convinced me.
Yeah, great example there. Yeah, 30 minutes and the consistency, the regularity is a key in so many things. If we think about health and fitness, how what do you have to do? Well, the regularity, going to the gym every day or every other day, just getting 30 minutes in will make a big difference.
Absolutely.
So there's no magic bullet to it, and here's the next thing maybe to weep about. You cannot create wealth quickly. And here's one of the big myths about it, thinking that we can do this very quickly. But it does take different steps, different stages, and so over time. One of the things I found in reading the literature, and especially from Skretly Blotnick, um, the suggestion that create wealth in a decade. And so that's what I set out to do, that in 10 years, I would make it happen by following a plan and to become financially stable first and then financially free, that is independent of money in making whatever decision I make about how to spend my life. And so you can't make it quickly. Well, second thought, you could get a gun, head for the nearest bank. But there may be consequences of making wealth in that way. So the best thing is a 10-year plan and and thinking long term for the process that we want to start to engage in. A
Yeah.
timeline for that is on this next slide, and we got 7 different stages, starting from the preparation stage to finding your singularity. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Finding collaborators to work with, and then putting it together in a business and launching that business. Then there's all the years of developing that business to where it's really commercially viable and solid. And then when the money starts flowing in, how to invest it. And then the final stage of having an exit plan. What are you going to do with that success and with that money?
You know, what comes to mind is people often say, you know, when you say, well, wealth can't be created quickly, people are very quick to say, well, what about this person or what about that person who supposedly was an overnight success? And I think we're sort of enamored with that idea of the overnight success. We celebrate that, we romance it. Anytime in my study of wealth creation and wealth creators I've come across, you're just, the overnight success is just putting a very small time frame or a frame around a time period when, yes, they sort of went to the other side. But if you look at it closely, there was always such a build-up to it of cultivation of talent or reaching out and connecting with people. So I've never seen an actual overnight success. And then most of the time, when if that even can happen, you see people lose that success or lose their wealth really fast as well. So it's not really a success, in my opinion. The other thing you said about the final part of the plan is to know what you're going to do with that wealth. I love that so much because it puts you in that sense of thinking, keeping the starting with the end in mind. And I've actually known people who have created a lot of wealth and then lost it because they didn't have a plan for what to do with the wealth once they had it. And so putting your mind there, putting your mind in that sense of like, okay, well, when I have the wealth, well, what am I going to do with it? It sort of future paces you to that point and then starts calling on resources of, okay, like getting yourself there and thinking that you're already there. So it's a great exercise.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and one way to especially run children is just to indulge them with a lot, so they really don't learn the value of a dollar. And so, what are you going to do with that wealth? What kind of exit plan? When I started, the only goal I had was to become financially stable, and stable meant that I wasn't one paycheck away from some, some serious financial problems. Um, Being self-employed as a trainer and doing, at the time I was doing therapy, counseling with people. So there was no dependable paycheck. It was dependent upon the clients I had in any given week. And so just any difficulty, if I had a financial crisis come in, or if I got sick and couldn't function for a while, um, I was one paycheck away from really disaster. So I just wanted financial stability. Once I had the financial stability, and that actually didn't take very long, then I wanted financial freedom. And our definition of financial freedom is the ability to make choices about what you do in life, but not based on if you can afford it, but what you want to do. And so then I set that as my goal. Once I hit that goal, once I became financially free, then I started thinking about what am I going to do with the equity that is built up, and how do I want to devote it? Well, I found several different projects that if I had the money, I could take over a school and fill it up with NLP teachers. If we had the money, we could create an NLP chair at universities and start giving degree programs in NLP. So as I saw that there was so much more to do, then I wanted more so that I can make a bigger impact on this world and leave a legacy.
Yeah, and what an amazing feeling that is to be in that position, to be financially free, that you're not inhibited or limited because of money. You're freed because of money, and you
Yeah.
can then give back. And yeah, I'm not quite there, but I'm really looking forward to being there.
Okay. Well, we've been talking about money. So here's another, and for me it was shocking, and it is for most people, I think, another fact about wealth creation, and that is that wealth is not money, it is creating value. So we've got statements here on this screen. Money is just the sign of wealth. It is not the core of wealth or the essence of wealth. So here's the paradox. We have to get money out of our eyes so that we can see opportunities for creating true wealth. So what then is money? Money is an exchange of value. And so wealth is finding and creating things that add value to life. So one of the exercises we'll do in the training that we'll do in Santa Cruz in April is helping everybody really create their own personal definition of wealth. And we'll start with a sentence stem and see how you answered it. I know I will be wealthy when. And how will you define it? Will it be by so much money, so much equity, so much income, so many possessions? Would it be, I know I'm wealthy when I have plenty of time to do what I want to do? Will it be, I know I'll be wealthy when I have health and fitness and energy, and I feel alive and have vitality in my everyday life? Someone who doesn't have their health, they could have millions and billions, and how wealthy are they? I know I'll be wealthy when I have loving relationships. Because again, to quote the Beatles, money can't buy you love. So how will you know when you're wealthy? What is wealth? Well, we're going to define it in a very holistic way. It's all of those things and more. And so once we know what real wealth is, which we're going to use the word value in creating value, then when you have a valued way of living and you have richness and abundance in mind, emotion, speech, behavior, relationship, time, etc., then that's wealth, and that's what we want to create.
So I just want to say, I have nothing to add to that because I think you put it so well. For those attending, if you get anything out of this webinar, if you never read the book and then you don't come to the workshop, this is the piece to take away from this webinar. You can go so deep with this, and this was the game changer and continues to be the game changer in my life. The times that I go wrong or that I get off this track of this wealth journey is when I start putting money or my focus on money rather than wealth and creating value. And it may not seem obvious now, the difference between the two, but the deeper you go with this, the more obvious this becomes.
And it is so paradoxical to get the money out of the eyes so that we can make money.
Yeah.
Martha Sinclair wrote a book, and the title was Do What You Love. Well, that's wealth. Do what you love. A lot of people are trying to make money so they can go do what they want, and they've got it reversed. Her title of the book is Do What You Love, and the money will follow. And there's a lot more to it than just that, but that's a kind of a directional orientation around money. The next slide continues this. Money can't buy wealth, and the heart of wealth and wealth creation is giving value. So it takes a lot of abundance of thinking, believing, creating, having ideas, caring, appreciating, being able to get into the right states. It takes a lot of abundance, and that's why we call it inside out wealth. It doesn't come from the outside in, it comes from the inside out. Another paradox in this whole wonderful thing called wealth creation.
Well put.
So this brings us to our singularity, and there's a diagram. This diagram comes from Jim Collins in his book Good to Great. And in Good to Great, he's talking about companies and organizations. And he's talking about the companies that not only are commercially viable and basically a good place to work, but the companies that become truly great companies and all the measurements that he used. And he said that it is this singularity, this interface between three different values. One is potential, one is passion, one is profit. The potential is your talent. The potential is what makes you come alive as a human being, and the contributions, the value that you can give. So the potentials. And you can use the SWOT analysis to look and search for your potential. Could be a strength, it could be a weakness, could be an opportunity, it could be a threat. So the potential of the difference you can make, that people will pay for that value that you can add. The passion is your attitude, your motivation, your state, the ability to get yourself caring and appreciating and then valuing that contribution you can make. That's attitude. And then profit will be your economic engine. Who needs what I have to offer? What market could I create about creating something that they don't even know that they need or want? And so the economic engine, the profit loss statement, and so that interface, when you can find all of those, it becomes what we call the singularity. And now you know with a laser beam focus what to do, that one singular thing that can create wealth in your life.
Yeah, this idea of like we have solved so many problems in our lives along the way, and all of those are really a potential economic engine because there are plenty of people who haven't solved that problem. And like I had said in the previous webinar, is I assumed a lot of times that when I solved the problem that everyone else had solved it as
Yeah.
well. And
Yeah.
that's not true because people will come to me sometimes and say, well, how did you do that? How did you solve that? And it's like, that's an economic engine. And you don't have to take every problem that you solve, but everybody can find problems that they solved, in other
Yeah.
words.
One of the things I discovered in starting with real estate, I made several major mistakes. And the first one was not understanding how to choose people. And so I went through the ups and downs of choosing people who were not the right people. They weren't responsible. They didn't take care of things. In fact, they did the opposite. They tore things up. They didn't pay their rent. And so after a while, this threat, this weakness that I had, I one day put my hand to my forehead and thought, if anybody should be able to read people, it should be someone with NLP training. So I started to think, how could I choose a responsible or an over-responsible person to be the person to choose to be in the rental property? It took a while, but eventually I figured that out. And once I figured that out, solve that problem, then instead of having people in and out in 6 months or a year, I had people averaging 8 years staying in the property, and 1/3 of them ending up buying the property. So once I saw that problem and started talking about it at the wealth creation trainings and other places, people wanted to know the answer to that problem. I think I could have created a career
That's
just
what
answering how landlords can choose right people.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You could totally do a real estate program because I remember when you were here in Santa Cruz last time I started asking you about this. I was like, well, how did you make where did your wealth come from? And you started just giving me like these simple things that you do in an interview and you write into the contract that it's a way of filtering people. And I was like, this is brilliant. And it's so simple. It's like one of those things that like, I could have thought of that, but I didn't.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things we'll do at the training, and we'll spend some time doing this and setting people up to interview each other, ask questions, is what problems have you solved? Because you may have the answer. It may be a real economic engine for you.
It just goes to show, I mean, we're all holding tremendous potential to create wealth, and the marker of that is just every problem we've ever solved.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of business ideas dormant in us until we start pulling it out and thinking of it that way.
So when you look at this chart on the singularity, two things are exclusively about you, your potential, and your passion. The profit is that interface with the real world out there and where there's a market, who needs your answer, who could take that value and they profit from it, which then gives you that profit. So this really highlights our next slide, which is wealth is created inside out. So this blows out the myths that you need lots of money to make money. It's not from outside in, it's inside out. And so getting wealthy inside, getting abundant inside, and this speaks to, on the subject of passion, the subject of abundance attitude rather than scarcity. I think most of us have either experienced someone in scarcity mode or we've been in scarcity mode, and that is not the time to do business because people will pick up the vibrations that you have to make a sale, that that you're really not offering. You're manipulating as hard as you can to get that sale because you're desperate, not because it's going to add a value to my life. And so starting from that state of mind, so on the screen there, wealth is a state of mind and emotion that allows you to express that value that you're giving, that abundance that you have, both verbally and behaviorally.
I think you just hit a huge pain point, probably for every single attendee here, including myself, is that those times and when we've been in those places in our life where it's just like, I have to make money, I have to get this sale, I have to get this bonus, or or I have to get this job. And when you're in that state, I'm speaking from personal experience, but I know many people have said the same thing. You seem to push exactly what you're trying to get away, and in this case, it's money. I have repelled money. I have repelled people when I had to get the sale, and it's just there's something about that vibrational energy, and it's not even like woo woo. There's something to it that you could probably measure in physics that just seems to repel what it is you're trying to get, or repels people, which is the same thing. And yeah, I mean, I've been there, and I'm sure every attendee has been there.
Yeah, yeah. So to say that wealth is inside out says that wealth is a state of mind. Wealth are thoughts, creative thoughts, solution to problem thoughts. Wealth is the experience I bring to somebody. So that even if I sell something, just a commodity, and anybody else could sell it, I can add value by making the experience itself wealthier, richer. So we have lots of potential, and if we know what it is, it's this value that I'm giving, and if we're in that giving mode, then it sets up that other self-organizing process, organizing attractor of wealth, then money, value is brought back to us because that's how we live. It's inside out. So in the training, we may have to change some limiting beliefs for people to step into this kind of a state.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's because a lot of this is so counterintuitive, and then if you think about what your current beliefs are now, well, that's kind of what's keeping you where you are now. And it's when you challenge those beliefs, especially with a lot of the counterintuitive things that you're saying, that's when the game starts to change.
So if wealth is inside out, and if wealth is not money, then our next statement is that salary, what you get, what's coming in, actually poorly indicates financial wealth, and that saving is a much better indicator. So Stanley Thomas and other people who wrote things like The Millionaire Next Door talked about how that financial wealth is created not so much by how much you earn, but how much you save. And some of the statistics they gave, because that's what he did at Harvard, was a statistician, and he was looking at the statistics of people and wealth. One of the statistics was that there's as many CEOs living paycheck to paycheck as there are secretaries. So, and they feel as they're one crisis away from bankruptcy or just a major a downturn in their life. So it's not what you earn, it's what you save. So now comes up this whole question, are you a serious saver? And one of the things about us Americans is I think we're some of the lowest savers of all the countries in the world. That other people know how to save, and somehow we've really been seduced by the consumerism and the need to buy, and thinking that I'll go have some retail therapy, and somehow that's going to make things better when I'm having problems.
Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely true. And I think some people confuse that with financial freedom. Oh, I can go out and buy anything that I want. And a lot of times, and I'm an example of that too, that it's consumerism or that idea that's driving you rather than you being in control of it. And if you're using it to make yourself feel better, I mean, that's no different than using alcohol or drugs or anything else.
Yeah. So with saving being a much better indicator, when you save, you build up capital. When you build up capital, now you have some opportunity to invest if the opportunity comes around, if you are looking for opportunities to invest. If you're looking for opportunities or if they come knocking at your door and you haven't been saving, you cannot really take much advantage of that. And so being a good capitalist, saving 10% each time, getting serious about saving. The How do you save? Um, so now we come to another one that's going to be shocking. This is uh, the first chapter in the book, The Millionaire Next Door, and the title of that first chapter is called Frugal, Frugal, Frugal. Three times the word is used, and so that leads to our point that wealth is created by frugality. Now, oftentimes I've said this in the different trainings and seminars on wealth creation, and people have semantic reactions. They just shake all over like we push some buttons because of what they think frugality means. It does not mean being stingy. It does not mean not spending in an effective way. It actually comes from a Portuguese word that means fruit, fruitfulness, and it speaks about the joy that you get from what you have. And so frugality is having a high joy to stuff ratio.
Excellent.
So joy to stuff ratio, I always like to, now that I've gotten through this one myself, to ask people, the stuff you have, how much joy do you get from it? And it's amazing, even though we buy lots of stuff, a lot of times we're not taking the time to really enjoy it, to savor the things that we have. So in the workshop, we're going to do a little exercise on this and see if we can raise that joy to stuff ratio for people.
Yeah, being a father, watching my kids, they see something on TV or whatever, and they gotta have that toy, they gotta have that thing, and it's amazing. It is so amazing that how fast they get bored with it. This thing that they thought was just going to be everything, and this often doesn't change when we become adults. We think that wonderful car, that nice house, and there's nothing wrong with having those things, but the emphasis we put on the material goods as if that's going to bring us some sort of happiness, and then we're setting ourselves up for a huge disappointment and a fall when that thing doesn't give us the happiness that we want because we're trying to fill something that we're not bringing from the inside out, like you mentioned.
Yeah. Here's a craziness in our American way of life. We buy so much stuff that we don't even have room for it at our homes, so we buy storage bins to go store our stuff.
Yeah, and most of us are guilty of that.
When I first learned this, I took a pad of paper and I walked around my house, opening every closet and going to the garage and looking at what I had. And then putting a 0 to 10 gauge. How much joy am I getting from this bicycle? How much joy am I getting from my fireplace? How much joy am I getting from? And I just went through all the stuff and then all the stored stuff in the back of the closet and realizing I was getting zero joy to stuff on many, many things. And so I started house cleaning, taking a lot of stuff to Habitat for Humanity or Goodwill, and then going to like my bicycle, which I hadn't been on for a long time, and setting a goal of just enjoying getting out, taking a bicycle ride.
Mm. There was a study done on people who invest money in things versus people who invest money in experiences. And they gauged the happiness of both. And by far, the people who spent money on experiences um, and were much happier. And I just got back from Japan last week, and that's an experience that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life as a memory, and that is priceless. And that's never going to get old. It's never going to
Yeah.
rot. I don't need to put it in a storage bin. And what you're talking about here in this whole webinar is the experience of wealth, not money, but the experience of wealth. And that is the richest experience. That is an amazing experience because there's so many things that go in with it. The financial security, the abundance, and the experience of wealth is priceless.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what is implied in this and in wealth being inside out is responsibility. So our seventh point is that you and you only are responsible for your financial success. So the question that Robert Kiyosaki asks in his work on Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or the quadrants of wealth creation is who's responsible for making you wealthy? And in his left side of the quadrants, when you are working for somebody as an employee, or whether you're self-employed, uh, is that it's not the boss's job to make you financially stable or independent or free. You're responsible for that. So here's another one of these states, one of these frames of mind that enables us now to walk that process and get through those stages of wealth creation to start assuming I'm responsible. So what can I do to increase my salary? What can I do to make myself indispensable as an employee? What can I do that's going to add value since I'm the one responsible for my success financially?
This brings up so much for me, even still. Intellectually, I agree with everything that you're saying, and I know that, and yet I still feel like these beliefs bubbling up inside of me. But yeah, what about the economy? Or what about the housing market, or it's just all these things that we tend to blame our financial
Yeah.
situations on, and those things might be true. The economy might be tanking. Those things can definitely be true. But when we
Yeah.
put the responsibility back on ourselves, that in a sense is wealth. And the other thing too is like people might hear your story and say, well, sure, Dr. Hall, you might not have been born into money, but you were born with certain talents that I don't have, or you were born with an IQ it's higher than mine, and you were able to figure this stuff out. And what would you say to people who hear your story and say, yes, this might work for you, Dr. Hall, but it's probably not going to work for me?
Well, I think it's obvious that's a limiting belief, and it's a belief that's not going to be very ecological. It's not going to be a belief that's going to help to move things.
Mhm.
If we think about the state of wealth, is the state of wealth a state where I take and assume I can I can think something, feel something, say something, do something, or is it the victim state where I blame and accuse and feel like I can do nothing? How wealthy is that state? So, sure, there's all kinds of constraints, whether it's the housing market, whether it's the finances in the country right now, whether it is the opportunities in my particular um, training or area or education. There's constraints. Um, One of the things we'll talk about is how to see opportunities. That's a meta state, because you don't see opportunities with your eyes, you see them with your mind. And then how to seize opportunities, which is all about being able to manage risk. And we'll do some risk management skills in the training.
Looking forward to it.
Our next point, number 8, is wealth is created by giving and not getting. So if it is investing yourself, the value that you're adding, and if you're giving value, then it's by giving, and this once again speaks about the state of abundance, And and when we break down the word value at the emotional level, the word value, when you value something, you're appreciating.
Mhm.
So appreciation is that joyful, passionate um, state in which you see value and you can then give that value. So this is how the process of wealth creation occurs through investing yourself by giving value.
And there is just something magical about when we're giving. It just puts us in a state. I was just thinking with this brought up for me. I was driving with my daughter, who's only 9, and we pulled up at a stoplight, and there was a homeless person asking for money for if exchange for work, and she pulled out an apple she had from lunch from school, and she said, "Dad, roll down the window and give him this apple." And he was so appreciative when we did that. But just to watch her state transform in that moment because she felt so
Mhm.
good about giving, and she just she looks at me and she says, "I love to give," and I was just like, I could just sit next to her and just soak up that state that she was in is something very magical, and I mean that is wealth, that
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. So with this inside out wealth and with wealth being an expression of giving, then uh, a key thing that we all know from business is to receive more is to add more value. So one of the things we'll do in the training is to start exploring how can you add more value. And when you're in that mindset of how can I add more value, then you'll find it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You'll start finding ways to do that. And then as the last bullet point on this particular slide, your your work becomes play because it, it's fun, as you just described with your daughter.
Yeah, it's an amazing feeling.
Well, all of this so far has we've implied something that we haven't said directly. So now it's time to say that, and that's number 9. Wealth is created with other people. Wealth is created through others. The through makes sense when we think about I make wealth through my customers, through my clients. Um, it's with other people because I'm going to need a value chain of people creating the product, the service, the information that I'm offering. It's also created with people as I have someone to mentor or supervise, or I mentor other people, or create collaborative partnerships so that wealth being done not alone, but with other people, then requires a lot of relational and social skills. So a few years ago, Forbes magazine, year after year, they had the wealthiest billionaires in the United States. And of course, Bill Gates was always at the top of the list. Second on the list was Paul Allen, his vice president. Third on the list was his next vice president. And fourth on the list was his fourth vice president. So Bill Gates did not become wealthy alone. He brought other people with him. So that leads to the question, who will you make rich with you? And so this is working with people, through people, to really create wealth.
Yeah, that's you know, a lot of people identify with this lone wolf archetype, and I've done that for a long time too. And it, in most cases, did not serve me one bit, especially when it came to wealth, business, and money. Uh, and we can look at, and again, we can look at the stories of wealth creators and try to look at it. And we love this idea of a lone wolf who just goes out and does everything on their own. It's just not true. It's just a myth.
Yeah. When I created my publishing company, and I created that because Crown House and Meta Publications were not publishing my books fast enough. So I created my own publishing company.
I couldn't keep up with
And
you.
yeah, so at that point, I had to I had to hire a printer. I had to hire a binder. I had to get people who's going to do the the artwork and the book covers. So it's not alone. It's with other people, and the quality we create is part of that value chain process of whatever we're doing. If I'm hiring someone to create my websites, hiring someone to do some of the marketing, I need other people. And if I'm selfish, if I'm not thinking win-win, if I don't know how to create great negotiations and have collaborative partnerships, I'm really going to suffer and not make the kind of wealth I could make.
And I mean, that is wealth too, when you're connecting with people and you have that network, that team, and I mean, it almost puts you in a position of you can't fail because there's just so many people involved propping this thing up, and
Yeah,
that's wealth itself. Yeah.
yeah. So just as a concluding one, here's number 10. Wealth is created by focus, by passion. We talked about that singularity and the passion. And then we add some things that is another form of wealth and yet oftentimes neglected: persistence and discipline and resilience. And all of that means it's a lifestyle. That's why it's not a singular state. It's many, multiple states that when we access those states, we have more ways of responding. We can be much more flexible and have many more resources available to us. And so um, uh, a lifestyle. Uh, the second bullet point here is that it's seeing and seizing opportunities. We're going to spend a lot of time about that. Um, that presupposes that there's wealth all around us. If only you could see it, if only you could seize it. And seizing it usually involves risk management. And a lot of people will not enter into this whole process because they play to their fears, and so they play small rather than stepping up, managing those risks in an intelligent way.
Uh, this is the third time I've done this webinar with you, and I get tremendous value every single time. And I've read the book twice, so it's so what we're dealing with here. This is to the attendees is this is sort of the meta perspective. This is the big picture that Dr. Hall just went over. There are a lot finer details and actions and tasks that go into this, but this is kind of the step back and looking at the big picture. And all the other stuff, it would be impossible to squeeze into an hour, even a 3 or 4 hour long webinar. So this is that big picture. This is that sort of meta uh, take on this, and what we get into more, what we will be getting into more in the workshop is all the other pieces and how to execute this. And the thing is if you don't go to the workshop and this is all you stop here, these are like principles that you can just continue to go deeper and deeper with. This isn't like, oh yeah, I got that, cross it off the list. These are often things that we have to keep learning, and we learn through applying it to our experiences day to day. And like I have mentioned already, I have to learn a lot of these over and over, and it will get to a point though that some of these I internalize, and now they're a part of my behavior, they're part of me, they're part of my lifestyle, and that's really ultimately where we want to get. So the workshop is basically learning how to do that, and that's why I'm very excited about the workshop, because that's something I haven't done yet, is take this workshop with you. So at this time, if you have any questions, go ahead and put those questions in, and we're going to answer those questions for you. Before we do that, though, I do want to mention the workshop that's coming up March 31st, April 1st, and April 2nd. That's here in Santa Cruz, California. Dr. Hall will be coming here to teach that workshop. It'll be 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the morning at Hotel Paradox on Ocean Street. You will receive an email after this webinar that will include the link, the sign-up link for that. You want to do that. It's getting kind of late. You want to do that today, because there's early bird pricing, and that ends at midnight Pacific Standard Time. Otherwise, if you sign up after that, you're going to end up paying $200 more, and that wouldn't be a very good financial decision. So save the money, sign up now, and come join us for 3 value-packed days. I mean, if you thought this webinar was good, just wait for the workshop. Michael Hall was here last year teaching meta states. We did 3 days. It was the largest workshop NLP Gym has ever put on, everybody left overwhelmingly satisfied. And I remember looking at the manual when I had it printed out, and I thought, this is just, there's no way we're going to get through all this. And Dr. Hall got us, not only got us through it, it didn't seem like it was taxing. It went so well. And it was also very entertaining. And he did demonstrations, and we got to practice everything. It was an amazing workshop. So that's why this is so exciting, to be spending a weekend working on wealth creation and completely getting that into your body, getting that into the muscle, and it's NLP too. And I also want to say, for anyone who hasn't had NLP training, it is not necessary to have NLP training to get the most out of this workshop. It is, Dr. Hall has a way of making NLP so user-friendly and so applicable with people who don't have the background and the training. So don't let that scare you off. If you have no NLP training, it's going to be just as amazing for you. If you do have NLP training, you're going to get you're going to understand, it's going to refresh your skills, because you're going to understand the mindsets and the techniques, a lot of the techniques, excuse me, a lot of the techniques that Dr. Hall uses. And before we get to the first question, do you have any more that you want to say about the workshop or the presentation you just did?
So one of the unique things of the workshop is that everybody will walk out with a 10-year plan beginning to be mapped out. So that's one of the things we do in the workshop. With each piece, people will be creating their 10-year wealth creation plan. So when they walk out, now they can start making their plan real.
Yeah, I can't wait. I've done that plan twice, and I can't wait to do it live and be able to ask you questions in the process if things aren't coming together for me. So one of the questions we have here is, how do we get this into our behavior? How do we take that jump from, this is sort of like this meta understanding, to actually like really understanding it through and through?
One of the ways that we'll do this is through the mind to muscle pattern. This pattern was actually invented from this workshop. If you read Wealth Creation, if you read the books of all the people from Kiyosaki to Thomas Stanley to Napoleon Hill to whoever else, you're going to hear lots of principles, lots of great principles. But how do you get them into neurology? Well, we've got a pattern. It's called mind to muscle. And so we're going to linguistically drive those concepts, those patterns. So we'll be doing that and presenting many of the principles, so that you can walk away and then start mind to muscling those. Then you're commissioning your body how to feel it. Once your body knows how to feel it, then it'll be natural, it'll be intuitive, it'll be at ready access when you need that principle. So that'll be one of the ways we get into neurology.
Great. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions here. Let's see, will this session be available to view later? Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what's the best venue or best way to do that. But so many people have asked that same question. So yeah, let me just figure out the best way to make this available. But yeah, this has so much value. So that's not something I want to just sit on. Someone asked here, what are examples of economic engines? I guess that's from earlier in the presentation.
Well, an economic engine is the question, what would it cost for me to produce a product, a service, information, and what kind of costs what kind of pricing can I make for this? And then is there a margin there that will make this an economic engine that will drive the creation of wealth? So so now we're going to look at markets. We're going to look at what people want, what people need, and then look at what is being charged in that area and what can be charged and how to add value to it. And so that's the economic engine. So it's how we actually do business, and it goes to the business plan itself and the margin of profit.
Another question here, and I think this question kind of spurs another question for me, but I'll ask their question first. Is talent a belief?
Uh, no, talent is the hardware. It's what the predisposition. It would be what you're wired for. So Howard Gardner came up with a multiple intelligences model, the 8 multiple intelligences, and ways of doing assessment to see which ones, whether it's athletic talent, whether it's musical talent, mathematical talent, visual kinesthetic talent, linguistic disposition. So discovering that, you're discovering what you're wired for. And when you do that, then it's what makes you come alive. So that it's like something clamoring inside as a potential, wanting to be expressed.
Hmm. So you're starting to touch on the question that I would ask, and I'm going to ask this question because I know I've found myself in this feeling, more of a state, feeling myself in this particular state because it's not the first time I've heard people say, well, if to become wealthy or to do what you want to do and make money at the same time, well, just find out what you're good at, find out what your talent is. And, there are times, especially, sometimes when I have low moments where I go, I don't even know what my talent is. I don't know what I'm good at, uh, so I can almost hear other people asking that question. I don't know if any of the attendees are thinking the same thing, but I definitely find myself in situations where I go, I don't know what my talent is. I don't know what I'm good at. And so, is there a remedy or solution for that? And is that something
Oh,
that's been in the workshop?
yeah, sure. So we're going to talk about the SWOT analysis and looking at the SWOT analysis. Many people have gone through the SWOT analysis. We're going to do the meta SWOT analysis because once you identify a list of things you can do, um, and oftentimes because we discount, I can type on a keyboard. I can use a mouse. So here are some activities, some talents. So you start putting those together. Then it becomes, what do you believe about that? What do you understand about that? What decision have you made? Does it count? Do you value that? Do you disvalue that? So the meta SWOT analysis will go into it in a much deeper way, and sometimes that's where we find the blocks to wealth creation in limiting beliefs or limiting decisions or limiting understandings about something.
Yeah, and when I think about the workshop you did um, last year here in Santa Cruz, I mean, that was so much about clearing out those blocks so that you enter that flow state, because that's really what keeps us from being in that flow state is just that sort of garbage, that blocks the limiting beliefs, the thoughts, the things, the distractions. And
Yeah.
yeah, so the going after the limiting beliefs as a part of this training is going to be probably life changing for many people. And I know in my training in NLP, my work in NLP, that belief change has been extraordinary. Probably the greatest thing that I've gotten out of NLP, of all the NLP training that I do. And there's so many ways to go about taking on limiting beliefs. And I think that was a question too from the past webinar that we did. I wish I remember the exact question because it was a big one, and it's one that we can spend hours and hours answering. But in general, I think you probably covered most of the pieces of that. Okay, I don't see any other questions here. If anybody has any more questions, I'll give you just a few moments to type those in. We definitely want to get those answered for you. And while we're waiting for that, I just want to mention again, if you go to the website nlp-gym.com, that's nlp-gym, gym.com, you can sign up for the Inside Out Wealth workshop coming up March 31st, April 1st, and April 2nd. Remember, you want to do that today because the early bird pricing will be ending. and there will be you still will be able to sign up. It'll just be more expensive, and I always have that happen. I always have people signing up after the early bird pricing. You're just spending extra money and you don't need to, so get in now. But you're perfectly welcome to spend more money by coming in late if you want to. All right, I think that I don't see any more questions coming up. Any last words, Dr. Hall?
Well, the last word I'd like to say is that to me, it's so important for people to be wealthy, to be abundant, to have a sense of richness, of thought, of emotion, of speech, of relationship, of activity, to feel rich inside that that I have something to contribute. I have value to add, and I can do that with myself. I can make my life meaningful. So we want you rich.
Yeah.
It doesn't help for people to feel poor, to act poor, to talk poor. Um, and so we want you rich, and this wealth creation is one way to help to achieve that.
And that brings to mind another point that I forgot to make is, if you're thinking about coming to this workshop, there's this thing called opportunity costs, and that is the cost of not choosing the potential gain that you lose from not taking action or not doing something, not making a decision, because not making a decision is a decision. It sneaks up on us, and we don't think of it because we don't think of it as a decision. We just think of it as, I'll just keep doing things the way that I'm doing them. Well, that's probably why you are where you are. And if you're happy where you are, then no reason to change. But if you're not happy with where you are, if you're not happy in your finances, if you're not feeling wealthy, this is the time to make one of those decisions and think about the cost of not taking action. What is the cost of not doing something different? What is the cost of not going after wealth and creating financial stability? And Dr. Hall talked about a 10-year plan, and to some of you that might seem too long, but if you don't make that plan, if you don't do anything, or if it seems too overwhelming and just like, I'm not going to get started on that now, well, the 10 years is still going to pass. You're still going to be 10 years older 10 years from now, and you're not going to have the financial stability, you're not going to have the wealth that you want, you're not going to have the financial freedom that you want if you don't get started now and start working toward creating that plan and creating your wealth. So what is the cost of not making a decision? What is the cost of not investing in yourself? What is the cost of not attending this workshop? So that's the kind of thing that I think of anytime I make a big decision is there's always a cost to not doing something. So, and sometimes the cost to not doing something isn't that high. And then you say, okay, well, it's not worth it to me. But what is it worth to you in the next 10 years to have the financial stability that you want? And that can start right now. And that's why I get so excited about this, is that it starts now. It always starts now. Okay, any final words? Since I kind of did a little extra piece there.
Yeah. No, I think we've covered a lot, and it is, as you said, just the beginning, an overview of the details.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank all of the attendees for sitting with us for the past hour. It looks like hour and 16 minutes. And I want to thank you, Dr. Hall, for taking the time to do this out of your busy schedule. I know you just got back from Egypt a few days ago. You're probably still a little jet lagged. And but it goes to, to me, it speaks to your commitment to wanting to get this invaluable information out to people. And like you said, we want people to be wealthy. The world will be a better place when people have the freedom that they want, and also the freedom to pass this on and help people and pay it forward. It's a very exciting thought. Okay. Well, we're going to bring this to an end, and thank all of you who are here, and thank you, Dr. Hall, and can't wait for the workshop coming up in a month.
And we'll see you then.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.